The Fiordland Sounds have long been a magnet for tourists. Over 140 years ago, Dunedin's Union Steamship Company began running regular excursions to the Sounds. I've been checking out some of those voyages and made them the subject of this episode of Talking Pictures. Late in 1876, the Union Steamship Company advertised an opportunity in the new year to spend 5 days exploring Milford Sound, part of a 2-week trip round the South Island on board the SS Wanaka, under the command of Captain James Malcolm. Excursions such as this became annual events, sometimes requiring 2 or 3 back-to-back sailings to meet the demand. Artists of both the amateur and more accomplished variety often availed themselves of the opportunity to tag along on the voyages and capture views of some of the country's most spectacular beauty spots. There were 2 well-known painters aboard the Wanaka in 1877, artist John Clark Hoyt and dentist Henry Frere Rawson. The works Hoyt produced likely included this view of Milford Sound, which is today in the collection of the Dunedin Public Art Gallery. The works Rawson produced went on display at the Colonial Museum in Wellington later in the year. Likewise, pharmacist and artist Charles Decimus Barrode was on the SS Rotorua for the 3rd annual Union Steamship Company excursion to the Sounds in the first week of 1879. The Sounds were also a magnet for photographers, of course. Mr. Burton of Dunedin photographers Burton Brothers was also on board for the voyage of the SS Rotorua to the Sounds in 1879. Alfred Burton returned to the Sounds many times and took a great number of photographs there. This image in wet jacket arm was taken during the visit of the SS Tarawera to the Sounds in 1884. Another Dunedin photographer, Frank Coxhead, was also on the Tarawera in 1884, making what is thought to be the first of 13 or more, often back-to-back visits that he made to the West Coast Sounds between 1884 and 1893. The excursions between 1883 and 1897 were conducted by the SS Tarawera. And the SS Rotorua conducted a trip over the 1897-98 New Year period, and then the Union Company's new steamer Waikari took over, making 2 trips in January and February 1898. Homing pigeons carrying messages were released during all 3 of these voyages of the Rotorua and the Waikari. This one from a bird released from the Waikari at Milford Sound on the 26th of January 1898 bears the message, "Arrived Milford Sound 9:45 this morning. Passengers in 7th heaven. Delight with trip and will be sorry to return. Weather perfect." And it's signed by Captain John Anderson. A more sobering message was sent from the Waikari during its next visit. It read, "Preservation Inlet, Tuesday, 10:15 a.m. Arrived 6:45 p.m. yesterday. An accident occurred last night in hoisting out launch. The ring of the hydraulic derrick broke, the derrick falling right down on the deck. The captain was struck on the back by some of the gear and somewhat badly hurt, disabled for a time. 2 doctors say no serious danger. 3 passengers also slightly injured. C.A. Smith, H. Chancellor, D.M. O'Connor. Nothing serious. Resolved, proceed on tour. Ship in charge of Chief Officer. Weather squally. Will send a message from Wet Jacket Arm and another from Milford. Signed, E.B. Cargill." 12 years later, the weather was refusing to play ball again during the Waikari's 2nd trip to the Sounds of the 1909-1910 season. Poor visibility in the Sounds wasn't ideal for sightseeing. On the 4th of January 1910, the bad weather dispersed, but by then the Waikari was ready to head out of Dusky Sound for the run home. Almost all the passengers were on deck, making the most of the break in the weather. Dunedin photographer George Moody, who like his predecessors was a regular passenger on excursions to the Sounds, was on hand to take their picture. Then at 12:21 p.m, the bows of the Waikari suddenly lifted, and there came a harsh, grinding tear, a sudden jolt, a repeated crashing tear, another stop, again a torturing, ripping heave, and after the third of the bumps, the vessel cleared the obstruction and floated in the water beyond. In about 10 minutes, the passengers were calmly transferred into the ship's boats and taken away from the sinking ship. On board, the remaining crew kept the fires going as long as they could and remained at their posts until the rising waters forced them out of the engine room. Fortunately, this gave the captain enough time to run the ship aground on the rocky shoreline of Stop Island. The passengers landed on the island near the sinking vessel, and an immediate start was made to transfer luggage and supplies from ship to shore. While photographer George Moody was able to capture the chain of events that followed, plates, negatives and prints taken earlier in the voyage that were stored in the baggage room were ruined. While boats were sent off to Pusica Point Lighthouse to raise the alarm, a campsite was cleared in the bush and a human chain formed to pass supplies up from the water's edge. It was a tight squeeze fitting all the passengers beneath the makeshift tents that were erected at the camp, and the sodden ground was rapidly churned to mud. Fires were lit, and the cook set to work preparing food and drink. The next morning, some of the women passengers were sent off to slightly more comfortable lodgings several kilometres away in Richard Henry's former hut on Pigeon Island. This photo shows the women boarding the boats for their jaunt to the hut. The unscheduled stopover in Dusky Sound was short-lived, however. Once news of the stranding had been relayed from Pusica Point to Bluff, HMS Pioneer was soon on the scene to transport the castaways back to civilization. The ship Moora had also been sent from Dunedin to Dusky Sound. It arrived the morning after HMS Pioneer and collected a small number of castaways who had stayed behind. By the time the Moora arrived, the Waikari was in its death throes, having turned over during the night, so now all that could be seen of the wreck was a small longitudinal slice of deck showing above the water as it lay on its side. Soon the Waikari had slid into deeper water and disappeared out of sight. Some weeks later, a salvage diving expert was brought in from Australia to ascertain if there was any likelihood of the vessel being refloated. Clearly, there was not, for the remains of the Waikari still lie beneath the waters of Dusky Sound today. That's it for this episode of Talking Pictures. See you next time, and thanks for watching.